Welcome to White Women Wake Up, the podcast where we, two women from different generations, come together for real, unfiltered conversations about awakening to our cultural biases. I'm Janelle.
I'm Karen.
And we're here to explore how we, as white women, can learn from one another and how to unlearn harmful patterns, create new ways of being in this world without shame. So I'm kicking us off today, so I'm going to lead some topics. Before we do that, we left us on a note last time about triggers and kind of asked everyone to reflect on throughout the week what had triggered them that week and just kind of back up and understanding where that happened. So I did have a trigger. I had a little bit of a tiff with a friend of mine. And sorry, listeners, I can't give too many details just to protect that friend. But basically, we were coming at something from two different perspectives. Now, it wasn't a political, it wasn't a values conversation. It was truly a conversation about an activity, like something that I wanted this friend to engage with and something this friend was not ready to engage with. And so, and we just got into a nice little tiff and argument about it. And I was really triggered by this because from my perspective, what I was asking was fun and lighthearted and great and easy and just exciting kind of thing. But what was great about this, we stayed in the conversation. So I was really proud of both of us. And I was able to unpack, and we were both able to unpack, that we were just coming at it from very different perspectives. So from my friend's perspective is the activity that I was bringing up was not something that was safe for them in the past. It was something that was honestly had a lot of harmful memories around it. And I didn't know that. I was completely unaware of that. I did not understand that context. So when I was talking about something, it was all from my great memories and perspectives. And so it just was a really good, just a good conversation to have and realize that like so much context can shape something that's so shared, if that makes sense. Like this could be a shared experience with two drastically different contexts and perspectives in life, and it can just shift how you view things. And so that was my big wide awake this week.
That is really good, Janelle. And in fact, it's funny because, we come with themes to this talk, and the big thing is we can't share them all week, which is crazy, right? But your trigger is really associated with my trigger as well. So I was having a conversation with a friend this week, and it was kind of, I would say it was controversial, right? And, but we were really getting into it, and I was not uncomfortable with it, but they must have been, because all of a sudden they used the word, it's nothing. It's nothing. And they shut the conversation down. And I just wanted to stay in the conversation. I wanted to kind of figure out how we could get to some resolve. And so it's interesting what you said is you and your friend at least stayed in the conversation. It was uncomfortable.
It hard.
Triggered both of you.
It was very
hard.
Both
were triggered, which is interesting because sometimes you almost need to, like my husband and I use this, like we have to re-enter the room theme, like we're going to leave the room and then we're going to re-enter so we can have this conversation. Yet, my friend wasn't willing to. And so it was interesting having a conversation with other friends. They use the word silence as a weapon. They said that that's something that triggers them, is when someone just goes silent and they, instead of using their words, because their words will be offensive to you, they just use their silence. And I had never really thought about that before, but this is exactly what that person did to me. We were having the conversation. We both were obviously triggering each other, and yet we weren't willing. This other person wasn't willing to stay in the conversation or even use words like, I can't have this conversation right now because it's painful for me. So it really did trigger me because it just shut me down. So anyways, it's so interesting in a weird kind of way, this notion of having the courage to use our words when we're triggered and to be honest with each other. Hey, that's triggering, or I need to step back for a few moments to rethink about what it is that we're talking about. I don't want to make you angry. I don't want to get in a fight. So that's not my goal. Anyways, it's interesting that you said that about triggering. So we both had the same kind of weird experience.
Well, I think I think this happens in a lot of people's everyday lives. And I think, it's tricky. What you're asking for of this person is to recognize even that they were triggered. And I think that is a hard step in itself. And so that's why kind of what the conversation was last week is like really just first acknowledging and understanding like what is triggering us, because that'll help stay in conversations with family and friends, and that'll help just conversations in general. But I do think that's a tough initial step. And
I think we're so afraid of our emotions. Like we haven't practiced out how to respond to one another when we're feeling these kind of intense emotions.
Can you clarify the we? Is this like the collective world? This is
yeah,
like women
I should. You're right. That's a big problem too in conversation when I use the word we. That's kind of a generational thing as opposed to the word I. You're right. I think, thank you, Janelle, for helping me with that one.
You're welcome.
But
Always
I
there
think
for you.
I have a difficulty when I know that the emotions may be getting high to be able to re-enter and articulate my actual thoughts. And so maybe that's why I get triggered it's so funny. I love that, Janelle. You're right. I need to use the I word. So anyways, but that's great. This is making me think, and it's making me become more, I'm learning or trying to unlearn patterns that I walk with.
Yeah.
So
no, I love it.
Yeah.
My therapist is going to love that we've been unpacking triggers for the last week. It's going to be a great conversation today with him later. Anyways, so I heard something really interesting this morning. I will say it's on TikTok. And before I share this with you, because I want to get your feedback, I'm not saying that I 100% agree with it. It's still too soon for me to have fully unpacked it. I think I really need to do a little bit more research around this, but I think it was a really interesting concept of what this person said. And so at the core, what they said, and I'll tag the creator in our blog when we kind of write more about that. But what she said, that cancel culture is inherently built and supported by white supremacy. And I thought that was such an interesting take. And anyways, wait, I want your initial thoughts, and then we can kind of unpack more what she said.
About the thoughts about cancel culture and
being
white supremacy.
But it being inherently a white supremacist, concept.
Talk about trigger words, right? Janelle, you're using 4 right away, right? Culture,
that's what I'm here
cancel
for.
Culture,
here to
white
trigger
supremacist. I think my initial reaction to this is, first of all, I think that I think when we're using the word in this context, white supremacist I think we're using that word as a group of people that really don't even want to talk about race. They want to go back to where we were before. And so that there's this kind of language like cancel. There's all this vocabulary that they're deeming as negative, or that vocabulary that news media is able to grab onto so that a group of people can really look at this as a problem. And so whether it's perpetuated, maybe that's the better word, maybe it's perpetuated by white supremacy.
And maybe she did use that word. I'm not
perpetuated.
great.
Yeah, that
strong possibility.
And I think it can be. I think it. I maybe it's because there's more fear in a white culture about this idea of being canceled. I would have to do data on that. That's something I'd have to do research, because I don't want to automatically assume that more quote unquote white supremacists are using the language of cancel culture than, let's go to the opposite of liberal radicals. So I don't really know.
So when you
But I'm
initially
not
reacted-
afraid. Okay, let me say one thing. I'm not afraid of the language, and I didn't react negative to the language, and I'm going to say that I think that that's a positive, because I actually am curious now about the subject. And I think one of the challenges that I know my generation or myself in the past, I would have heard you say those 4 words, those trigger words in a row, and I might have silenced you, or I might have silenced the conversation because I didn't have answers to it. And I don't actually want to pit one group against another group. And so that part, I don't really know, because I don't know the data on that, but I'm not afraid to have the conversation.
Well, you are a better reactor than I am, because my initial reaction was, oh my goodness, here we go again. Another thing we're blaming on white supremacy. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am one all day long that says, F the patriarchy. We live in a capitalist hellhole, and white supremacy is just the root of all evil. So, I mean, I'm pretty far progressive that way. But when I first heard this, I did think, okay, this feels like a stretch now. It feels like, again, something that we are tying 2 things together just to put under this umbrella of something that we've all deemed evil, kind of thing, and stuff. So you're better, that you were more open. I was only open because I was like, I gotta hear how she ties this in together. And so, but as she spoke, I really understood where she was coming from it. So she wasn't saying cancel culture itself is perpetuated by white supremacists. Because actually, unfortunately, the more progressive liberal people engage in cancel culture than other. It's typically white progressive leaning people and stuff. But what she was saying, and so that's why I think it was shocking, because it was supposed to hit to the core of white progressive people like myself, to be like, oh, I'm not perpetuating white supremacy. But what she was saying is, because at the core of white supremacy is kind of what you were hitting on earlier, is about like not changing, is about leaving things status quo, is about, and so inherently by canceling people, we are not giving them the space and the ability to make change. And it's not to say that all these people who have quote unquote been canceled are good people who needed to change, but a lot of them are. A lot of them need the perspective or need education and growth without just shutting them down. And so like it really, as she was starting talking to me, it really like made me think about like, this is what we're doing in this podcast too, is we don't want to shut people down. We want people to grow. And in order to do that, we got to talk about the uncomfortable things. And so, cancel culture doesn't allow that. It basically says someone has made mistakes. And again, don't get me wrong, a lot of people have made some really tough mistakes out there. So I'm not saying this is a blanket statement for everyone, but as a whole, cancel culture doesn't allow for change and growth, and therefore it's inherently white supremacist, inherently.
So define
supremacist culture.
Okay, define then. Okay, so I understand cancel culture. So this is interesting. I understand cancel culture in some ways like a soundbite, which is really unfortunate. So XYZ, this person said something. They did something that was somewhat, or not somewhat, forget that's neutral, but did something that was offensive. And it got out in media. So this is a media-driven thing, got out in media, and everyone said, I don't want anything to do with you. What you did is so bad. You're no longer important in society.
Correct.
Is that how you would define cancel culture?
That's definitely how I define cancel culture.
Okay.
And I think the thing is, though, but it's gone to an extreme where are people in society who have done horrific things that we can all agree are horrific and are not redeemable. But cancel culture has gone to where we're not just canceling those people. We're canceling people that, may have made a racist joke in the 80s or 90s. And yes, is that still horrifically offensive? Yes. But has that person showed change and growth like we would hope everyone in life has changed and growth? Yes. And so then this is where it
Okay, this is where you and I are going to go get derailed. But this is okay. This is, gosh, we are just opening up. Is cancel culture performative activism?
Well, this is exactly it. This is kind of what I think this woman was saying a little bit around, like, because she even called out that.
So now I can see how she's saying it's white supremacist, because it's like, okay, it's easy for me to say, and I don't want to bring names up because I don't believe in canceling people at all. But because I believe in generative love. That's a big part of what I believe in.
There's some people I do still believe should be canceled. Harvey Weinstein is a great example of one of them.
Okay. So anyways, this is just such an interesting conversation because, so in other words, this person becomes they've done something terrible, and you mentioned someone in a really good example. They've done something terrible, so now we can just cancel them, and we can do it immediately. It's performative. Does it have any substance? Probably not, because the substance is we no longer talk about that particular person. We've canceled them, right? Like I liked your definition a couple weeks ago about performative activism. It's performative if there's no substance. And so I find this so ironic. And it's interesting that you brought up this TikTok, because so much of this is media driven. And are we going to sit there and constantly just accept what media puts on us and not really think about it? Because here's the irony in what you're saying. When someone does something stupid and bad, we hate them and we want to cancel them. When someone overcomes their adversity, when someone overcomes, we'll see it with a movie star, for example. Maybe at one point they were in jail or they did something horrible, like even murdered someone, but they overcame that adversity. They've become a generative person. We then laud them as a hero because of that change, right? So what you're saying, I agree with you, is we cancel so quickly, we don't allow for transformative actions or transformative change. And so why do we buy into language like cancel culture? I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm getting at here.
But I think this is what she was getting at too, because again, majority of people who are involved in cancel culture typically tend to be more my generation or Gen Z, a little younger. But it's younger, and we do it as a stance for good values, but we're not giving everyone the chance for growth or change. And again, I agree with you. I think it totally is performative activism, because it's just an easy way to say, oh, hey, I allied with you because I, shut up this comedian. And in some ways, I think there are totally reasonable people to cut out of our world. I mean, that's not what we're saying. There are plenty of people that are reasonable that have shown they cannot change, shown they are not good people, that should be cut out. But there's also a lot of people who...
So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by cut out? Because that feels really strong as well.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, when I mean that, I mean okay, a great example, because I don't think anyone will argue with me on this one, is R. Kelly, who is do you know who R. Kelly is?
Yeah, I do know.
So R. Kelly...
But explain to our... just in case.
So R. Kelly is a hip-hop artist who was found guilty of basically being a pedophile and doing a lot of horrible, horrible acts kind of thing. And so by cutting it off, the example would be never listening to his music again, never. And so that's cancel culture. That's cutting it off, not giving him a platform or a voice in society. So that's what I mean by cutting someone off. And someone, again, like a R. Kelly is a great example of, I think that is very fair to cancel. It's very clear change and growth cannot happen there. I think, though, cancel culture, as I said, as a whole, is it's usually one person made a mistake. I think we can even go back to a couple podcasts ago, that woman from Coleman, Alabama, who definitely said some things that the internet didn't agree with, and everyone was really quick to be like, shut her down, she's canceled, she's done. And, I was proud. There was a couple people on the internet who actually like talked to her and said, hey, this is why people are mad, and it allowed her the space to grow. And so if we had just canceled her immediately, if she was a big celebrity, it wouldn't have given her the space to grow. It just would have shut her down, kind of thing. And she did grow, and she apologized, and you can tell that she genuinely learned some things from her impact. And so going back to, this is why cancel culture has gotten to a cycle of, I would say performative activism, and as this other creator said, perpetuating white supremacy. Because it also, what it does too is, white supremacy at the core is about being that our way is the best way, and our way is the way that needs to be kept. And so cancel culture, by cutting other people off, it does say, I know better than you. You're not going to grow. I want to keep things in the status quo that I feel. And even if it's coming from, again, a great place of allyship and, for people of color, for queer people, for, women of, it doesn't allow space to grow. And so that's, I think, the core of the issue.
So thank you for having this conversation, because the words were triggering. I probably didn't listen to it enough, or not listen to it, understand what you were saying, because from my own perspective, I understand in media that kind of a majority white audience, and I don't even know how to say this because I don't want to classify people, but I am, are uncomfortable with cancel culture. And because many of the persons in that particular subset are feeling that they're being canceled. And so when I first heard that, I didn't understand what you were saying. This is where it's all confusing, because we embed our own meanings in these different spaces. And so taking the time to unpack this is actually really important.
Totally. No, so I would say separately that people who don't like cancel culture, that's a separate, it doesn't mean that they're not part of white supremacy. It just means in this definition, that's not what it is. This is more definitely speaking to a young, liberal, progressive crowd who thinks they're doing cancel culture for all the right reasons, but actually it's harmful and inherently supports white supremacy. That's what I'm saying. So it has nothing, but I think you did bring up a good point, is cancel culture has also sparked, I think, in your generation, people who are very fearful to do anything.
Oh, absolutely.
For fear of cancel. There's a great story about you. I hope you don't mind me sharing this. We have a cabin in Eastern Washington, and sometimes in the summer, parking in front of our cabin, because we're right on the water. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yes, I know where you're going. I can't believe you're going to tell this story.
We're here to be vulnerable. Parking in front of our cabin gets crazy because we're right on the beach. And so we like to put a cone out just so we can get to our dock. That's all we're asking, is one cone in front of our dock so people don't park in front of it. And you got into a little tiff with someone one time who moved our cone, and you guys started going at it, and she backed over the cone, and the tiff got a little you can tell it got a little heated, but you backed down because I think, didn't she bring her phone out, or you were afraid that?
Well, I was afraid, being a white Karen, I was afraid that she would misunderstand my comment. First of all, this whole road has huge no parking signs on it. So it's not like we're taking up public space. It says no parking. And she parked there, and she was a brown woman. And I tried to be nice, but she said a lot of negative words to me. And I backed down because I was afraid she was going to take her video out and
and
make
to be
me
fair,
sound like I was a perpetrator.
But to also be fair, for her perspective, as we talked about, she probably has not had good interactions with white women telling her what to do. And so of course,
and I wasn't even telling her what to do. I was asking.
Totally. But the point is, I mean, looking at both perspectives, you can see how you were frustrated because she didn't know that people park on our property all the time and it's really frustrating. And you don't know her history with white women telling her what to do, kind of thing. And so there just was a discussion there. But yeah, I remember you saying like, you really backed down from it and let her park on our property for fear of cancel culture. And so it is interesting. And so again, my generation, well-meaning of all of this, we think cancel culture is helping, but it's not helping people grow. Like in that instance, you are a growing and learning person. So it didn't affect you, but there's a lot of people in life that would have just stalled their growth even further, having a situation like that or having not being like being canceled. And so
I think what's so interesting is I don't think personally I know enough about the concept of cancel culture in that your generation uses like cameras and videos to cancel out the movement. And like I wouldn't have even used that as example of cancel culture, but I think it is like what you're talking about. I also would love to say I also think it's not been a negative because it's like, for example, when you talked about R. Kelly being a pedophile or being accused of being a pedophile.
Oh, he definitely is not accused. He is.
It's bring awareness also of really harmful behavior. And I do think it has made us talk about kind of civility with one another, how to be civil. And so, maybe we're just acting so fast and maybe we're not taking the time to actually, like you said, a transformative change or have perspective over a long period. And so maybe this is this notion of, how are we all engaged in the language of cancel culture? Are we all so excited about a 5-minute soundbite that, and if it doesn't go along with what we say, we just cancel it? Yeah. So I don't know. You're bringing up a topic I wasn't expecting to have today, and
that's the point.
That's the
of the
point.
podcast. But I think so. It just was really interesting. It really struck me this morning. Are you okay that I told that story? Listeners, the look that she gave when she realized the story I was telling.
This is interesting and it's vulnerable. A therapist, one of the therapists of many years of a therapist, they always said that before you bring up a personal story, you should ask the partner or ask the person. But anyways, no, I'm comfortable with it because I honestly didn't evaluate it as cancel culture, and yet I was concerned. I was very provoked because the language that was presented to me was very strong. And I thought all I did was ask this person nicely not to drive over the cone and to park there. They clearly were not happy with it. And I might have reacted differently. You're right. If that was a white person versus a brown person. And I think I was concerned that because they were brown, they would take this as a race issue. And so
younger, brown and younger,
much younger. And this is one of the things I think that is a little harder, I feel, in my age group is often younger people use a lot more direct, heavy language, and it's hard to respond to that. And so I did just back down because I didn't really want that to go viral.
But I also still think cancel culture, it's also a really great lesson in, as we said, like so oftentimes a white woman's perspective is to speak calmly and to speak like in a, I hate to say it, it's a little bit of an entitled way. And that isn't always a tone. That's a tone that can trigger other people.
Yeah,
too.
You're right.
So it's
patronizing.
It's patronizing.
Yeah,
that's a great one. And again, it's well-meaning. This is what we're taught as white women, to be well-meaning, to assimilate, to be kind and sensitive, but it's patronizing.
Yeah.
It's not.
And so if this person had, in that parking situation, had reacted in the same tone, I might have thought they were being passive aggressive or some other tone. So this is, oh my gosh, we're learning so much. Okay, hang in there with us.
Hang in with us.
Email us. Let us know what topics you want to talk about, or if there's anyone that you think that should speak on this podcast, we'd love it because we're just
we're still learning, we're unpacking as you're seeing, but thank you so much for joining us today on White Women Wake Up. We really hope today's conversation sparks some reflection. If you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And until next time,
don't cancel us.
But also stay curious, stay open, and keep waking up. Bye. Have a great week.